Hi there, this is Dr. Moyer, and I am going to cover some how to documents with this lecture so that you guys know how to create a figure in Word and create a table in Word. And I also am going to start requiring you to report a standard deviation with the mean. Since we've gone over the meaning of standard deviation, I want you to become comfortable using it. One thing that I want to do first is talk about statistical symbols. And we haven't really spent a great deal of time discussing this, but we should talk about it now. So let me just open a new Word document. Anytime you're reporting a sample size, you are typically using a large N. And let's say your sample size is 100. To report that, you would put it in parentheses, n equals 100, but there would be a space before and after the equal sign. And because n is representing a statistical symbol in this case, it has to be italicized. The same would be true if we were reporting a standard deviation. There'd be a space before and after the equal sign. We'd report the number, and then we would be sure to italicize the SD. Another common statistical symbol is the p-value. Often you'll see it reported like this, or p was less than 0.05. So when you see a p-value report, when you need to report one, it's the same thing. There's always going to be a space before and after the equal sign. There should be a space before the less than sign, and then you're going to italicize the letter P because it stands for a statistical symbol. Sorry. You may also be reporting correlations, and you would use a small letter R to report a correlation. That stands for Pearson R. And let's say that the correlation is 45. You're going to have a space before and a space after the equal sign. You're going to italicize the letter R because it is a statistical symbol. Hopefully you're getting the idea now. If you're reporting the mean and you just want to use an M, you do the M space equals space. Let's say it's 5.09. And then the standard deviation is 3.48. And I'm going to put this in parentheses. I'm going to go through and italicize the M for the mean and the SD for the standard deviation. We will be talking about chi-squares, but I'm going to move that content to next week. But if you wanted to use a symbol for chi-square, it would be a big letter X. Then you would go to format font, and you would add superscript and then a number 2. So that represents chi squared, and then you would italicize that. You can also do the superscript or subscript here. In this case, I want to say the chi-square equals 3.79. 3.79. So we have multiple statistical symbols, and you can choose to spell out the word mean. In a sentence, you could say the mean age was 15.67, but you're always going to have to report the standard deviation as well. And if you reported it in a sentence like this, you would put the standard deviation in parentheses. You could also say the correlation was 0.45, but you'd have to report the p-value with this as well. And let's say it was equal to 0.000. I'm going to italicize the letter P, add a period at the end of the sentence. There are other symbols, and I'm going to put up a PowerPoint that shows just a page full of statistical symbols and how they're represented, but I wanted to make sure to point out that the space before and the equal sign is important, as well as italicizing whatever symbol it is that you're using. So there's that. Now let's go back to this data set. I want to calculate the mean age, so I'm going to insert the average here. You can see Excel is very good at picking up what data you want to use. So I'm going to hit enter. But I also want to do the standard deviation right below this because I need it every time I report the mean. The formula for that is going to be equal STD EVA. And then it's going to want to know the array. And I'm going to say A2 to A16, the same that you reported the mean on. And it gives me the standard deviation. I want to go in, format cell, make that a number so it only goes out 2 decimal points. So now, wrap text. The mean age was 22.40. You always want to go out 2 decimal points. That means adding a 0. SD equals 2.90. And then I'm going to go back and italicize the symbol for SD. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So that's how you compute the standard deviation. It's just an equal sign up here in the formula box, STD, EVA, and then the array, so the range of data. And then you'd always, when you report the mean, you're always going to report the standard deviation. It's required. And if you recall, at the end of the standard deviation lecture, I gave an example where both data sets had an average of 10 or a mean of 10, but one had a bigger standard deviation than the other. So even though the mean was the same, we know that there was more variance in the one with the standard deviation that was higher. And so the scores were spread out further away from the mean. And that's why we have to report the standard deviation. You have to know that. Okay, back to the Word document. I am going to show you how to create a figure in APA format first. I do want to point out, however, that on D2L I have these documents that you can use, so you don't have to use the video, but sometimes the how-to videos are helpful. So I'm going to insert a chart. I'm going to select a pie chart, and it's going to automatically open up an Excel file. And that's fine. We want it to do that. And let's say that I am looking at gender. So I am going to say that there were 65 percent males and then 35% females. Once you've entered these numbers, don't worry about this column 1. We'll get rid of that in a moment. You can close out the Excel file. I know it's probably makes you nervous though, so if you just want to minimize it, you can do that too. But I'm going to close it out. So we're back in Word, and now it's showing us the figure. The first thing I'm going to do is get rid of column 1 here, because that's not where the title goes. And then I'm going to make some other changes. So right now, there's a box around the figure, and I need to get rid of that. So what I'm going to do is put my mouse right on the line, do a right mouse click, select Format Chart Area. Then I'm going to go to Line, and depending on your version of Word, this may not look exactly the same, but you're looking for line. And sometimes it'll say line, no line. Other times it'll be like this, and then you can select no line. But basically that's what you're looking for is line, so you can tell it no line. You're going to hit OK. And when you now click outside of the box, I guess I have to click above it, there's no more, you don't see the box anymore. And that's what we want. Another thing I'm going to do is to add the heading. And for figures, the title or heading always goes below. For tables, the heading goes on top. And I always think of that as T table top. So tabletop, heading goes on top. The figure floor, the heading goes on the bottom. See how that works? We're just going to say figure 1, gender distribution for the sample. And when you're adding the sample, I'm going to have to put how big the sample is. So remember, I'm going to put parentheses and a space, an equal sign, another space, and then let's pretend that there were, you can hear my cat meowing. The cats are playing. This is their playtime. They're wondering what I'm doing in their office. Okay, so now that I've added the N, I'm going to go back in and italicize it, just like we talked about. The other thing is whatever's closest to either the figure or the table, whatever text is, has to be italicized. And so with figure, it's going to be, when it says figure 1 or figure 2, that will be italicized. And I forgot that these should be also capitalized. So now we've got the figure. It is an APA format. If you want to play with the colors, you can. You can select the piece of pie that you want to change the color on, and that's going to be under Fill. And let's say I'm just going to select this teal color. And then I want to do this other one as well. And I'm going to select well, let's do a green color. So now it's automatically updated the legend, and you can see, let me just make this smaller, that we have our figure. The title's below it. Here's the chart. If you wanted to move the legend around, you can. You can also make it bigger. If you want to make the text bigger, I'm sorry. Where do you do that? Sometimes this takes me a little bit to remember. It's not edit data. Format legend entry, maybe? No. format text, perhaps. Yes. So let's say I want that to be size 20. And then I would do the same for this one. And I can do that. Female has disappeared because I made the text so big. But it will come back. So now there's our figure. This does look a little strange. I probably would not make the text that big. I might stick to 14. And you can see it changed both of them this time. And that looks a little more, I guess, uniform compared to the title. So that's a figure. Now let's insert a table. I'm going to bring my cursor to the next page. Hi, Harrison, my kitty cat. Now I'm going to insert a table. And I'm going to go over here and tell it I want 3 columns and 8 rows. So here we've got the columns. And the first column I'm going to do variable name. And then I'm going to report the mean and the standard deviation for some variables. I want these to be centered and bold. And I know I'm going to be adding numbers here. This is tricky, so you want to pay attention. And depending on your version of Word, this may not work exactly the same way, but do a Google search for your version to learn how to set the tabs. So I'm highlighting just underneath the mean, this column. I'm going to go over to the tabs and I'm going to select decimal. And then I'm going to set the decimal tab somewhere in there. I want it close to the middle. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Highlight these. It's already selected decimal, so that's good. That's what I want. And then I'm going to insert it in there. Now, let's say stress. When I tab over, it goes, you can see right to the decimal tab. And the same for standard deviation. Let's pretend that number of cats in home. And hey, don't tear up that chair. Sharpening his claws. GPA. Glasses of water. I think you get the idea. So I'm going to actually just delete these last. Guess that didn't really work. It's going to say delete entire row. Yes. Okay, so here's the table. And you can see that I have the variable name, which I'm actually going to move back to over here because it looks better. I've got the mean, I've got the standard deviation. The numbers are lined up exactly by the decimal points. That's very important, and that's why I told you to pay attention when it comes to setting them. A little tip, if you don't set them ahead of time, going back in and adding it is really difficult. In fact, when I'm teaching this in the face-to-face format, and a student says, oh, I've already added the numbers, I have to go in and add the decimal. I say to them, you know what, just delete the table and start over. Because it's so hard to go back in and change them. A lot of times you end up doing it cell by cell, and it's just very tedious. So before you enter any numbers, you want to highlight like I did, and you want to go in and set the tabs. That way, when you go to enter the numbers, they're already set up for you. So another piece of this, we're going to highlight the entire table, do a right mouse click, and select Table Properties. Now, here I want to go to Borders and Shading. And again, your version may be a little bit different. I'm going to select None, and then this top one as well as the bottom one. And I'm going to say OK and OK. You can see I've gotten rid of most of the lines. I also want the line below this first row to show up. So I'm going to go back into Table Properties. I'm going to go to Borders and Shading, and now I'm going to add that bottom line just like I did for the whole table, but it will appear here now. And that's what the table has to look like to be an APA format. Remember I said table top. The title will actually go on top of the table, not below it like figures. Table 2. Means for variables in stress data. And whatever's closest to the figure or the table is going to be completely italicized. So I want this whole row, which is why I didn't just select the N. Remember with figure, it was figure. That figure 1 is closest there. So whatever's closest to the graphic. And for table, this means the entire heading. Then I'm done. That's how you format a table in APA format. Another little sneaky tip, once you've actually got one that's in perfect form, you can copy and paste it if you need to create another one that's similar and just put in different numbers so that you don't have to keep messing with it. But honestly, it gets easier. Once you've mastered the decimal points, it's not hard at all to do tables. So that concludes the lecture I have for you on these topics. I'll be posting a homework assignment as your discussion for this week so that you can practice making tables and figures, and I can give you feedback on it. Okay.